Good evening or good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to be able to moderate this exciting panel on partnerships for empowerment in Africa. I'm joined by Margaret Munene, Naomi Whittel, and Jim Jones. And my name's Lars Benson. I'm the Africa Regional Director at the Center for International Private Enterprise. You know, a few years ago, CIPE launched a Center for Excellence called the Women Economic Empowerment. And this is based on CIPE's belief that equal participation by women in the economy strengthens both free markets and democracy. CIPE was founded to foster women economic empowerment through partnerships and advocacy with civil society, the private sector, and national government. I'm joined today by Margaret Munene. She's the founding trustee of Palmhouse Foundation and CEO of Palmhouse Dairies. She shared with me that she's passionate about helping youth from disadvantaged backgrounds to acquire an education because she believes that education is a game changer. She's also passionate about rural women and helping to improve their livelihoods in the sustainable. The second participant speaker today is Naomi Whittel. She's the founder and CEO of the One Nutrition Just For You. Naomi shared with me that she was born on a biodynamic farm in Switzerland and is the mother of four, which includes twin boys. Since 2011, she has been building sustainable supply chains with indigenous communities all over the world. And then finally, we're also joined by Jim Jones. He is the Director of Global Community Programs and Strategy at ExxonMobil. In this capacity, he oversees ExxonMobil's foundation and major grant-making programs in global health, specifically in the fight against malaria, international education, and women economic opportunities. So let's start with the first question. We are going to give each panelist an opportunity to give some introduction remarks and respond to this question. In Africa, much like the rest of the globe, the COVID-19 pandemic is more than a health crisis. It is impacting labor markets and creating social and economic challenges. Women are among the hardest hit for many reasons, and we've already discussed this throughout the day. When we talk about partnerships, what can business, civil society, and government do together and individually to help women in businesses recover and grow? Let's go ahead and start with Margaret. Margaret, please feel free to give us some opening comments.
Thank you, Lars. I'm happy to be here and thank you for the opportunity to speak in this forum. Now, partnerships and collaborations are key in helping us combat the effects of COVID-19 pandemic. I work in the dairy sector in Kenya and will therefore give examples of partnerships that are helping women in this sector. Women constitute 70% of the labor force in the East African dairy sector and are significantly involved in milk production and marketing of dairy products. Now, even before COVID-19, women in the dairy sector were facing a lot of constraints in many areas, including extension services, input service providers, accessing of financial services, and accessing of good markets for their produce. Now, COVID-19 increased the impact of these challenges and caused further disruption in the supply chain. This has created a lot of constraints because, as we all know, livelihoods are built on supply chains. To illustrate how partnerships can combat these challenges, I will give an example of an initiative by the Global Dairy Platform, where I am an ambassador, called Dairy Nourishes Africa, or DNA. Now, DNA is a 15 to 20-year public-private partnership leveraging the collective strength of global dairy farm members and other players. The ambition of Dairy Nourishes Africa is to transform the African dairy industry by creating vibrant ecosystems for farmers allied and environmentally sustainable enterprises that improve nutrition, enhance livelihoods, and stimulate economic growth. Activities will take a full value chain approach and will include growing consumer demand, increasing farmer production, and strengthening the operating environment. To give an example of how DNA or Dairy Nourishes Africa is working, I will give you an example of what happened in Tanzania, where DNA is working, and generally what happened to the dairy industry in East Africa. In early 2022, due to COVID, the tourism industry came to a standstill. And my dairy including, we did not have anywhere to supply our dairy products. As a result, our source of revenue was cut, and we didn't have a market. And because of this, we experienced a huge decline in revenue and reduction in processing utilization. We had to reduce the salaries of our employees, and we were worried how we would continue to support our farmers, who are mostly women, by providing a market for their milk. Similar scenarios happened everywhere in East Africa, including Tanzania. Now, the Dairy Nourishes Africa took an initiative to help one of the processors to embark on a COVID response recovery effort. This action plan included, among others, launching sales campaign targeting new customers, since they didn't have any customers anymore. Dairy Nourishes Africa helped them to diversify their products and also help them negotiate deferred interest payments for their loan. Because of this help and the changes that Dairy Nourishes Africa helped this processor, this business is now stable, protecting the livelihoods of its employees and smallholder suppliers, majority of who are women. In collaboration with local processors, Dairy Nourishes Africa has launched processor-led extension services to combat milk waste, increase practical knowledge on enhanced milk production. To date, DNA has trained 401 farmers on a multitude of practices and has increased production has increased volumes of milk production.
Margaret, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Just cognizant of the time, I'm going to have to give others an opportunity as well. Naomi, can we move to you and talk to us a little bit about partnerships?
Absolutely, sure. Thank you so much, Lars. And thank you, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. This is a wonderful day. Mark, Natalie, it's just such an honor to be part of it. I'll answer this question really quickly. All of you got to see the beautiful video that started our session, and that was Philomena, and she is from Cameroon in West Africa. And when I went to Cameroon to start working with the scientists, the researchers that had done background on this incredibly important spice and all of the food that the Cameroonians eat on a daily basis, Philomena actually, as a woman in business, as a dietitian, was everywhere that my group was. So I was very impressed with understanding how not only is she committed to being in business and growing her business, but behind her sits several villages of women in business, in agriculture, that are supplying her with her ingredients. So I actually asked her this exact same question that was posed to me. How can she and the other women in her communities really get the most support right now during this most difficult time? And the answers were quite simple. First and foremost, a focus on the basic hygiene. So many of the villages in Cameroon don't even have running water. So how can we help to supply the basic hygiene and the soap stations so that hands can be kept clean and so that the virus doesn't spread at such a rapid pace? That was her number one. when that occurs and when there's more focus on that, then the women are able to focus more on their businesses rather than focusing on taking care of family members that are not well, which allows them to be able to continue to focus and grow those businesses. So we spoke a little bit about how the support of small loans, the support of leadership from other areas, mentorship around business, are all extremely instrumental in getting through these times within Cameroon, West Africa.
Thank you, Naomi. Jim, over to you.
Thanks, Lars. And just really quickly, I just wanted to say Happy International Women's Day to everybody out there. And thanks for allowing us to have a seat at the table and talking about this. You know, in your introduction to me, which was very kind, you mentioned the fact that women's economic empowerment is a signature program of the ExxonMobil Foundation. And I don't think I need to tell anybody listening to this that 2020 was an especially difficult year for everybody. And for folks who heard Henrietta Kolb's really prophetic and succinct comments earlier today about the problems that women entrepreneurs face in Africa, I don't want to repeat those statistics, but just know that we kind of went through a process during 2020 of talking with all of our partners who are working in the field and implementing programs that we help support in figuring out what were the problems that the pandemic was especially presenting in a situation where it was increasingly challenged. So, you know, a couple of things kind of bubbled up through that process. One was that almost all of the women entrepreneurs that we help support were facing a decrease in their sales, in their income, in their access to capital. They were facing challenges as they tried to shift to a digital economy, especially in places where broadband is certainly not universal and not everybody has smartphones. Through kind of interesting psychometric analysis, we found that there was an incredible loss of agency. There was greater anxiety among women entrepreneurs that they felt more powerless or less powerful. And of course, there were challenges with health, with childcare, and also sadly with domestic violence. So none of these issues were new; they were all there before. I think the pandemic kind of exposed them in a way that was really pernicious and really obvious. So we redoubled our efforts and our partners by working with the Cherie Blair Foundation, for example, in Nigeria, to help move their training of women entrepreneurs from an in-classroom setting to a digital classroom where we could reach 500 women entrepreneurs through business training in a remote distance learning capacity. We worked with an organization called ADPP in Angola, which works with women farmers to help them increase their crop yields, to take those skills still from a socially distanced way of training women farmers to grow cash crops, and at the same time kind of infuse messages of wearing face masks and why it was important to kind of increase their personal hygiene in terms of hand washing. We worked in Nigeria with Solar Sister to kind of redouble their efforts in their distribution of solar lanterns and clean cook stoves, but at the same time do it in a socially distanced way that's sensitive to the pandemic. So I guess, you know, the message that I would think that was really important for 2020 is that it's really an opportunity for us to learn how to kind of provide those interventions in a way that may be more efficient, and the pandemic may actually, you know, give us some lessons that we can learn about how we do things in a more efficient way moving forward. And I wanted to echo also what my colleague and friend Sarah Thorne from Walmart said earlier today, is that things weren't great before the pandemic for women entrepreneurs in Africa. And I don't think that what we should look for is just a return to what that normal was. I think that 2020, if we're going to make this pandemic be meaningful, provides us the opportunity to say 2021 and beyond should actually be better than 2019 was. So going back to the status quo ante of before the pandemic really isn't something that we should be aspiring to. We really should be looking at what those lessons are so we can move forward in a really productive way.
Thank you, Jim. Margaret, you work with over 500 small holder farmers who are mostly women, and your model enables women and their families to thrive and demonstrate what dairy can achieve for communities. What are some of the key lessons learned about training and educational aid?
Thank you. Now, we have learned that training and educational aid is a game changer in life. We have worked with rural women in the dairy sector for the last close to 20 years and have witnessed firsthand what training can do. Because of training, we have seen these women move from 1 or 3 cows to 5 or 10 cows and greatly improve their productivity per cow. The change this makes in the quality of housing, the ability for children to go to school, and the ability to diversify is really major. We have seen women empowered by dairy farming having increased income and influence over household expenditures, which boosts their social and economic capital. Dairy plays a great role in poverty eradication and contributes a regular source of food and income, and puts farmers in a better position to feed their families, send their children to school, and generally improve their livelihoods. So when we train them to become better farmers, it is really life-changing. Now, dairy cow ownership in developing countries improves nutrition outcomes in the families that own cows. So when we train them to keep cows and keep them well, we are really improving their livelihoods. Now, we mainly train our farmers to see themselves as business people and not just dairy farmers. And we train them to improve quality and quantity. This is usually a win-win situation because they get more milk to sell to us, and therefore they get more money, and our business also improves.
That's very impressive, Margaret. Thank you. Naomi, you've been engaged in several countries throughout Africa for some time, but your new venture, the One Nutrition Just for You, launched Get Healthy with the One spice fruit on November 13th with your partner Whoopi Goldberg on Whoopi Goldberg's birthday. Upon the launch, you indicated that the measure of success of this brand will not be in the bottom line, but rather measured by the number of people we empower. Tell us, how are you empowering women in Cameroon and creating a real movement for change?
Thank you, Lars. The real goal of this brand, Get Healthy with the One Spice Fruit, is about all of us having access to the foods, to the nutrition that can help us to be healthier versions of ourselves. I think this year, more than anything, that is apparent. And what's fascinating is in Cameroon, the native women of that country have been using this powerful spice fruit for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so Whoopi and I started talking about how this was a daily part of their lives, and how strong their metabolic health was and how strong their immune function was. And so wanting to bring that here to the US and share it with people all over the United States that have never heard of spice fruit before. And so that's exactly what we did. And the way that we're empowering the women in Cameroon through this business is this spice fruit is falling from the trees. The women of these specific villages that Philomena, who you saw, is working with, sources that spice fruit for us. And then we partner with the J&A Oben Foundation, which is a research institute that does incredible work. They do all the clinical research proving this natural ingredient. And here in the US, we are so happy to be working with Sprouts Farmers Market. There are over 350 of these amazing grocery, natural food stores all over our country. And Sprouts will be presenting our spice fruit at the beginning of May. Everybody can look at it on spicefruit.com. It's available now, but at store. And so Sprouts, along with our Cameroonian partners, we're all working together to really create an inclusive supply chain that is ongoing so that it has its own momentum. And that's how we're able to hold hands and work so effectively with our Cameroonian partners.
Thank you, Naomi. Jim, ExxonMobil has invested more than $120 million in its Women Economic Opportunity Initiative since it started in 2005. And your commitment to this work in Africa is truly inspiring. What have you learned after so many years of engagement on the African continent, and where do you see the greatest potential?
That's a big question. So you basically asked me what my day job is, and to summarize it in 2 minutes, but let me say that in reflecting on this, I think one of the most important lessons that we've all learned over all these years is that partnerships really matter. I don't think, maybe from where I sit, that there's any doubt about the fact that the private sector serves a central core function in being a prime mover in empowering women economically, whether it's through job creation or income generation or economic growth. The private sector really is at the core of this. But enabling women become more fully participatory in the economic life of their communities really requires all sectors working together. And I think that that's the biggest lesson that we've taken away in the decades that ExxonMobil's been working in this. Governments and of course civil society play really critical roles in expanding opportunities for women entrepreneurs or wage earners or farmers. So it's in that combined spirit of everybody bringing their strengths to the table. And the private sector certainly has a number of core competencies and business strengths that really can be applied to these partnerships and are being applied to these partnerships. But again, going back to what I said earlier, probably in the future, we can redouble our efforts to really looking at how we can move the needle in fostering better women's participation in their economies. A number of years ago, to that end, we supported research with the UN Foundation to ask the question, if you had $1 to invest in a women's economic empowerment program, how's that dollar best spent? And what came out of that after dozens of research teams in 2 years is a document called the Roadmap for Promoting Women's Economic Empowerment, which is now used by a lot of funders and implementers to really kind of look at those programs that are proven to work and help design programs that will actually move the needle. So, that research capacity is one small element that the private sector does on a daily basis, beyond funding, beyond check writing, that really kind of help foster those kind of partnerships. And one last thing I'll just say, that aside from that, and aside from the work that I'm responsible for in terms of community investments and our corporate philanthropic work, the private sector obviously plays a critical role in building out supply chains to encourage more women-owned businesses to become part of the economic life of corporations. And we source, for example, at our company, $500 million worth of goods and services every year from women-owned businesses. And I think this is the time, especially as we come out of the pandemic, to really redouble our efforts as private sector players in this space to really look at where are those women-owned businesses that we should tap into to become part of our supply chains. And working in partnership with organizations like We Connect and We Bank that identify and certify women-owned businesses around the world, we can actually foster a much healthier economy ourselves just because of who we are as corporate citizens in the countries where we work.
Thank you, Jim. Unfortunately, when we talk about partnerships and we have all of these inspiring stories and examples, especially in Africa, it's always we don't have enough time to actually go into too much depth. But I truly want to thank Margaret and Naomi and Jim for participating in your insights here today and definitely want to thank the U.S. Chamber Foundation for hosting this event and putting on a very, very important event around women economic empowerment. So from all of us, thank you so much. Again, thank you, Margaret, Naomi, and Jen.
Thank you.
Yeah.